Hey guys, how's it going? This is Fallout 86 from Raise Your Edge, and I'm here together with Marion 5. And yeah, we want to discuss some hands with you. And I found a super interesting hand in our private Discord group. So yeah, let's see what happened.
All right, so bunch of limps, pretty standard in these games, as you players who play in them know.
Yeah,
Definitely going to go multi-way a lot, and obviously we flop. Pretty big hand here. Middle and bottom pair. Obviously, it's not like a super nutted hand, but I think when you're playing against a couple limpers who we assume to be pretty weak players, I mean, we're obviously liking our hand here, right? I mean, we don't
yeah,
assume even weaker players aren't going to have pocket jacks very often, and then obviously we block threes and nines. So really, we're only scared here about like I don't know, like jack nine suited from one of these players. So I feel really comfortable with my hand here.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely, absolutely. Super strong hand. And we have the information that Arligan 1 is a huge gambler and
yeah.
he's also a bit aggressive. And with this reach, we go ahead and check our 9-3 hand. I think without informations and with mostly calling stations, I would really prefer just betting this flop, also pretty
Mm,
big, like 20, 25, maybe even 30 bucks on the flop. Because I think on the flop, most people don't really care. And you can always throw in a green chip, right? Just one chip, easy to call for everyone. And no one really cares if the pot is 15, 20, 25 bucks. And yeah, you can just manipulate the pot size a little bit. So you have a way bigger pot on the river when you start sizing up on the flop.
yeah, for sure. I definitely agree because I think, especially if you're playing against really passive players, when you check here, they're just going to have, especially when they limp early position, they're going to have, I mean, they're going to have some hands that connect with this board, like hands maybe like queen 10, 10, 8 suited. But they're also going to have a lot of like low pocket pairs, maybe some suited aces that are just going to check back. So really, you're just basically just giving free equity. Whereas if you bet, oftentimes you can get at least one call, even by like under pairs in these spots. When players are in position, people love to see the turn. So I think you'll definitely get calls by a lot of like 9x, possibly some under pairs, and then there's going to have some draws as well.
Yeah,
But
all
yeah, as you
gut shots,
say,
all straight draws.
yeah, if he's got the read, that's fine to start checking as well. So that's what he does. And then this guy comes out betting half pot, 10 into 20. So what do you think now?
I think it's a huge mistake to raise too small. What I see on a regular basis is a raise to 25 or something like this on the flop.
Mm,
But you have to realize the pot was 20. He just bets half pot. He has either a jack or a strong hand, right, or 9 with a good kicker in general. And you want to bloat the pot now, so raise to pot size or something like this. So I think something like 60 bucks, maybe even 65 is definitely in order, especially when you think your opponent is calling too wide on the flop and is a little bit on the aggressive side.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't mind going to maybe like 40 or 50. I think, as you say, like 25 would be too small, but I think
Yeah,
anything above like, yeah, 40 to 50 to 60, I think sounds about right because
yeah,
as you say, especially against looser players, he's not really going to give a shit when he's got a jack. He's not folding. When he has any type of draw, he's not folding. And realistically, when he has like he could be just betting air balls, and those are going to fold, regardless, basically, right? So I think, yeah, you definitely want to size up in these spots when it's a small relative bet, and the board is. I mean, it is fairly dry, but there's definitely some draws. So he goes
yeah.
ahead and
And our
raises to
range is
55.
also really polarized, right? We have
Yeah,
either like queen 10 or a two pair type hand or a stronger hand, but nothing else. And the only set we could have is pocket threes, because yeah, with nines and jacks, we're definitely ISO raising pre.
yeah, for sure, for sure. So, yeah, he goes ahead and raises. I definitely like this play. Sizing seems good, and then
Yep.
under the gun calls. Turn is basically a complete brick. Obviously, it brings some backdoor draws. So what do you think now? I think personally, I would definitely want to keep betting this. I think checking doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because we're raising a pretty polarized range on the flop. And this hand definitely just can keep betting because the turn's really not that bad. Obviously, if the turn's like, I don't know, maybe like a queen of spades or a 10 of spades, those are spots where you can definitely start checking some of your weakest check raises on the flop, this is basically our weakest check raise, so I don't mind. But on this card, which is a complete brick, um, I think just going ahead and betting here makes the most sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, also, a huge point is we unblock Jack X with our
Mm,
bottom two pairs. So he has all the jacks. So he has Jack 10, Queen Jack, King Jack, Ace Jack. And he will fold none of those hands when we bet turn.
mm,
But if we check, he will remember that we check raised on the flop. And most opponents are careful, right? They are not punting money away. So he will check with most jacks on the turn in general, even when he is aggressive. So yeah, that's why when the turn is a complete brick, I'm in for a huge turn bet. I think all the draws will call again, Jack X will call again, and that's about it.
Yeah, for sure. So he goes ahead and bets 105, which I think is okay.
Oh, okay.
I think, yeah. And
That's fine.
anywhere between like, I don't know, 100 and full pot. Obviously, if you ever read that the guy's like really call happy, you can just bomb it. Like over pot's totally fine. Setting up a river shove, but just make sure you don't go something like, I don't know, like 40 or 50 here. That's just a really big mistake in my opinion, because you're just really losing a ton of value, and you're also giving him really good odds to draw with, like, you know, if he floated you on the flop with something like king queen, right? You don't want those hands to call with a ridiculous price. So
yeah, and 10-8 and queen 10 get the correct price when we size so small.
Yeah, so he keeps betting, gets the call, and the river is a deuce of spades, so it doesn't really change much. I mean, this guy shouldn't have 5-4. Maybe, yeah, he can't even have 5-4. He's not floating the flop with 5-4 spades.
No.
So really, the deuce is like the biggest brick in the deck. I think the only thing that gets there would be obviously the backdoor spades. And then if he has a hand, I mean, you could have hands like, say, queen 10 of spades, king queen of spades, and then obviously hands like maybe 9x of spades, ace 3 of spades, or some other 3x of spades. But really, this card's pretty bricky, so we shouldn't really be too concerned about the backdoor spade.
No, when we think in combos, I agree. Because how many combos have us beat now, right? Like you mentioned, king queen, queen 10, some 9x, maybe some ace 3 spades. So we're talking about 5, 6, 7 combinations that have us beat now realistically. So important here, yes, the backdoor flush draw got there, but he still has, and the most important thing is the jack is a spade, right? When the jack is not a spade, it's a different story. He has way more flushes. But here, as you can see, the jack is a spade, so jack X spades is not possible in his hand. So yeah, we should just bet the river for value. Still get called by jack 10 sometimes, definitely queen jack, king jack, ace jack. And when he is a loose aggressive player or loose bad player, he will definitely call all those worse hands, even on this bad river. So always think what happened on previous streets and not just look at the board texture and say, oh, well, the flush got there. I think check calling or check folding is the best play. No, when you think we get called by enough worse, you still have a very profitable value bet. And I think we can still bet fairly big on this board texture because nothing really changed. No draws got there. Or what do you think? What should we size on the river?
Yeah, I mean, I think something like between like, say, 200 and 250, 260. I mean, again, it depends on if you have reads on the player at all. Obviously, if you know he's pretty call happy, I wouldn't mind just going really big, like full pot, if you think he's just going to call with all jack X. I think, I mean, we didn't discuss, there obviously are some additional value hands that we lose to. You could have a hand like maybe something like jack 9 suited occasionally, maybe something like jack 6 suited, but again, it's like pretty rare because we block the sets as well, so we're not really concerned. Aside from the flush, we're not really concerned with too many strong value hands. And the thing is, people show up in these spots as well with like kings and aces and queens even. You know, you see those overpairs in these spots where you don't expect them. So there's even more than the jack X. So yeah, I think it's definitely a spot where we just want to keep value betting. The only time I wouldn't is if I think maybe he's really aggressive and he always pounces on weakness. In that case, I might just check it and hope that he has a hand like queen 10 or king queen that ends up bombing the river as a bluff. But I really want to have a strong read before I do that, because I think a lot of players they just end up checking back when you do that, and then they also end up checking back a hand like ace jack or something, you know, whereas if we bet, we can definitely get value from that hand if he plays it as a limp under the gun. I mean, it's hard to know what people's ranges are when they limp under the gun, but you see all sorts of stuff. So I think, yeah, just betting here, something like, again, 200 to 280, somewhere around there. And then if he shoves, it's a really gross spot, but I think it could be a spot where we can actually fold, just because I think, especially when you put a big bet out and somebody shoves the river after the action too, after you check raise and bet turn, then bet river and he shoves, I just don't see players having a well-constructed bluffing range in that spot at all. So I think it's a spot where we can actually bet fold.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree.
So he checks and his opponent bets 200, and now I think we just have a really easy call. I mean, it's not like a super fist pump call, obviously, because we are losing some hands that we talked about, but we just can't fold this ever because, again, he can have some bluffs. He can be overvaluing a jack X, so pretty standard check call there.
Yeah, I agree. But I think you told a very important point that we should usually only check call the river when we have a good read, when we know our opponent is aggressive, that he can bluff. Because a lot of opponents are just bluffing are just bluffing on the turn or on the flop when they have equity. So with hands like 10-8 and Queen-10 and King-Queen, sure, they bet flop, sure, they bet turn, but they are not falling through on the river. And the same applies when you check to them on the river. They just check it down with 10 high, with Queen high, and they know they're going to lose, but they don't understand the concept of bluffing. So they just go to showdown, expect to lose, and they move on to the next hand. And of course, when you know that, you should basically never check call against those opponents when they have no bluffing range, right? So just take them to value town. And this is also a huge population tendency that most people are calling way more hands on the river. They call usually a bit too wide, but they don't bluff enough. Of course, this is a really general read. You should always try to make your own reads from your opponent, but when you play in those 2-4, 2-5, 5-5 player pools, this is a huge, huge population tendency. So really make sure to value bet light enough on the river. This will really make you a ton of money in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. And I think something else too, I think to consider is, let's say for example, the board was two-tone. Like let's say there was 2 spades on the flop and then the flush draw breaks out. I think in that case too, it's pretty easy to think, okay, all the draws missed here, so now I'm going to check to allow him to bluff, which is okay, again, if you're playing against aggressive players. But I think people also forget that when all the draws missed, you also have a lot of perceived draws in your range, right? So you can actually get a lot of value, because in that spot, when you say check raise and then bet turn, bet river big, if it's like a really draw heavy board and they all bricked, like a lot of times guys are going to look you up really light, which they should. If you're an aggressive player, they're going to know this guy's got a lot of missed draws, right? So don't always think, okay, a bunch of draws missed, now I have to check and let him bluff. You also need to think, as I just said, that, I have a lot of missed draws, so I'm going to keep betting this as well. So you kind of want to have that balance. Obviously, sometimes you do want to put those traps in there. You don't want to be super predictable. But I think the main theme, as we talk about, is that just go for value. When you have a good value hand, just go for value and don't really worry about trying to play too tricky, checking, unless you have really good reads. So, yeah, I think this hand is, it's a good example. I think river, just go ahead and bet, though.
Yeah, I think this was a super, super interesting hand. Let us know what you think in the comments, and stay tuned for the next hand. And this was Follow A6 and Mariano 5 for Razor Edge. Take care, guys.
Peace, guys.